Picture a man raising something difficult. He's thought about how to say it. He's chosen calm words, a good moment, a tone that isn't an attack. He brings it up because he actually wants it fixed. 15 minutes later, the original issue is gone. Nobody's talking about it anymore. And somehow he's the one apologizing. This is Robbin, and this is the Honest Ledger. And today we're auditing a pattern that a lot of men live inside without ever having language for it. The argument that was never actually about resolving anything, because resolution was never the point. Before we go further, this needs to be said clearly, because it's easy to hear what's coming and turn it into something it isn't. This is not every woman, and it is not only women. Men redirect conflict too, in their own ways, and that's a video for another day. What we're auditing today is a specific pattern that shows up often enough and consistently enough in enough relationships that researchers who study conflict in marriages have given it names and studied it directly. This isn't a character judgment, it's a mechanism. And once you can see the mechanism clearly, you can actually do something about it, which is more useful than just being frustrated by it. So let's open the ledger and go through what this pattern actually looks like when you slow it down. The first entry is the difference in what each person is actually trying to accomplish when a hard conversation starts. When a lot of men bring up a problem, they're doing something closer to troubleshooting. Something isn't working, they've identified it, and they're bringing it forward with the specific goal of fixing it. The emotional temperature of the conversation, for him, is calibrated toward that goal. He's not performing distress. He's not managing an audience. He's trying to solve something the way he'd try to solve any other problem in his life. Relationship researchers, most notably the Gottman Institute's decades of studying real couples in conflict, have documented this asymmetry in how people enter difficult conversations. Some genuinely oriented toward repair, others oriented, consciously or not, toward self-protection. When those two orientations meet in the same conversation, only one of them is actually trying to get anywhere. The second entry is what happens on the receiving end, when self-protection takes over. Being the subject of a concern, even one delivered gently and fairly, can activate something that has nothing to do with the actual content of what's being said. It activates the need to exit the position of being the person whose behavior is under examination. And the fastest exit available in the moment isn't engaging with the substance, it's changing what the conversation is about. Gottman's research names a version of this directly, defensiveness, one of what he calls the 4 patterns most predictive of relationship breakdown, where a legitimate concern gets met not with acknowledgement, but with a counter-narrative that makes the person raising it the problem instead. This isn't a conscious strategy most of the time, it's a reflex. And reflexes are hard to see in yourself precisely because they don't feel like choices. The third entry is what the redirect actually looks like in real time, because it's genuinely a skilled maneuver, even though nobody's doing it on purpose. He raises the issue. Before he's even finished, the conversation has already moved, not to the substance of what he said, but to how he said it, when he said it, why he chose to bring it up now, what it implies about how he sees her. The hurt on display is real. But it's hurt about being examined, not hurt about the underlying issue, and those get presented as if they're the same thing. He's now explaining that he's not attacking her, that he raised it because he cares, that he's on her side, defending the delivery of a concern that was never actually addressed. By the time that defense lands and the temperature comes back down, the original issue is gone, not resolved, gone. And raising it again means restarting the entire cycle. So for most men, after enough repetitions, it stops getting raised at all. The fourth entry is why this specific pattern developed, and it isn't because the people who do it are dishonest or defective. It's because emotional escalation works in the narrow, short-term sense of actually working. When strong emotion enters a conflict, the focus reliably shifts. The person who caused the emotion becomes responsible for managing it, and the original subject gets subordinated to the more urgent job of emotional repair. Nobody sits down and designs this as a strategy. It gets reinforced the ordinary way anything gets reinforced. It produces the desired outcome often enough that it becomes the default response, especially for people who learned early, for whatever reason, that being seen as wrong was more dangerous than almost anything else in a relationship. The fifth entry is what this teaches the man on the other end of it, conversation by conversation, over months and then years. He's not learning that his concerns don't matter in the abstract. He's learning something much more specific and much more corrosive. that bringing something real to her produces a reliable, predictable outcome, and that outcome is never resolution. It's an argument he has to manage, an emotional escalation he has to navigate, an ending where he's apologizing for his tone instead of getting an answer about the actual problem. And the lesson a reasonably intelligent man draws from that pattern, repeated enough times, is simple. It isn't worth trying. The day a man quietly reaches that conclusion is one of the most consequential days in a marriage, because what follows doesn't look like conflict. It looks like peace. It's not peace. It's the absence of a man who stopped believing honesty gets him anywhere in this particular relationship. The sixth entry is the ledger itself, the part that doesn't show up until it's already very advanced. Every redirected conversation doesn't disappear just because the argument ended. It gets filed. The financial decision that turned into a fight about his tone. The parenting disagreement that became 3 days of cold distance. The concern about the relationship that somehow became evidence of his own failure to appreciate her. None of these get resolved, and none of them actually vanish either. They accumulate silently on a ledger neither person is consciously keeping, until the weight of everything that was redirected instead of resolved becomes something closer to a wall. And from her side of that wall, it can look completely mysterious. Why does he feel so far away? Why did he stop trying? The honest answer, most of the time, is that every conversation that got redirected instead of resolved added another brick, without either person ever intending to build anything at all. The seventh entry is what actually happens once the wall is finished, because this is where the pattern stops being merely frustrating and starts being expensive. A man who's stopped bringing things forward hasn't stopped having concerns. He's just stopped voicing them to her, which means the marriage keeps running, functional on the surface, while the actual information he'd need to be a full partner, what's bothering him, what he needs, what's slowly eroding his investment, simply stops flowing in her direction. She's not managing a real partnership at that point. She's managing the appearance of one, and usually doesn't find out the difference until the appearance stops being maintained. The eighth entry, and this is the one most of this content skips, not every redirect is coming from a place of deflection. Some of it is genuine hurt, some of it is a legitimate difference in how two people process being confronted, and mistaking every defensive reaction for manipulation is its own kind of error, one that turns a communication problem into a character indictment and makes the actual repair work impossible. The skill worth building here isn't detecting an enemy. It's learning to tell the difference between someone who's momentarily defensive but still reachable, and a pattern that's calcified into something that reliably closes every hard conversation before it starts. Those require completely different responses, and treating them the same way helps nobody. So here's the turn. Because a diagnosis without a next step is just a complaint with better vocabulary. If you recognize this pattern in your own relationship, the first thing worth trying isn't a bigger, better argued version of the same conversation. It's changing the container the conversation happens in. Raise concerns when neither of you is tired, stressed, or already on edge. Timing changes outcomes more than most people expect. Separate the behavior from the character explicitly, out loud, before you even get to the concern itself. This isn't about who you are. It's about one specific thing that isn't working. Ask a direct, low-stakes question early in the conversation. Can I actually finish this before we get into how it landed? Which sounds almost too simple to matter, but it names the pattern in real time instead of letting it run silently. And if the pattern is consistent enough, entrenched enough, that none of this makes a dent over a real stretch of time, that's information too. Sometimes the honest answer is that a relationship needs a third party, a therapist trained specifically in exactly this kind of communication breakdown, because some walls don't come down with better phrasing alone. And if you're on the other side of this, recognizing yourself in the pattern instead of your partner, that's actually the harder and more valuable read, because change only happens from that side of it. The next time something hard is brought to you, the goal isn't to perform calm you don't feel. It's to notice the urge to redirect as it's happening, and choose on purpose to stay on the actual subject for 30 more seconds than feels comfortable. That's a small thing. It's also the entire difference between a marriage where hard things can be said and one where they quietly stop being said at all. None of this is about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about whether the two people in a relationship can actually hear each other when it costs something to listen. That's rarer than it should be, And it's also completely learnable for anyone willing to notice the pattern instead of just living inside it. If you've been on either side of this, the one who stopped bringing things forward or the one who's realizing, watching this, that you've been the one redirecting, tell me in the comments where you saw yourself in it, not to win anything. So the next person watching this catches it before it becomes a wall instead of after. This has been Robbin for The Honest Ledger, the channel that reads the fine print nobody hands you. Subscribe if you're done watching real conversations turn into something else.